1974, and a group of outcast artists gathered in a makeshift studio in one of the suburbs of Paris to launch what has later become the first ever exhibition of the Impressionists. They have been rejected by the elite of the art in France because of their style that was described to be unfinished and lacking in visual details, lazy with short brush strokes. But this style has become the famous Impressionist style. One of the famous critics back then, Louis Leroy, derided the Impressionists, and he used the term Impressionism as a derogatory term. He says, this is not art. This is merely an impression of art. The Impressionists themselves loved this term and adopted it and started calling themselves the Impressionists. The Impressionist movement has a lot of fruits, some sociological, some economical, and some cultural. But one of its main causes was technological. It is the invention of the camera. See, a couple of decades earlier, photography was invented. And before photography, the skills of any artist was measured by his or her ability to copy nature. But now that you have a camera, a technology that is copying nature, you didn't need to represent nature in this high fidelity. So artists unleashed their own imagination and moved from the era of objective art to the era of subjective art. So art moved from looking like this to looking like this or like this. This was one of the most prominent moments in history when the arrival of a new technology changes art, transforms art, and changes the meaning of the word art. It wasn't the first, and it wasn't the last. So I'm going to invite you to join me in a trip across history to see 5 more examples where the arrival of a new invention, of a new technology, transforms art. Let's go. Example number 2, the invention of the collapsible paint tubes. John Rand, in the 1840s, patented the collapsible paint tube. Before that, paint was transported in pig bladders or glass syringes and was subject to drying. But with the paint tube, the artists were freed from the confines of their studios, and suddenly their studio transformed from being 4 walls to being the entire countryside. It was the explosion of a new movement, the en plein air painting movement. And it was Renoir who once told his son, without the collapsible paint tube, we wouldn't have Monet, we wouldn't have Cézanne, we wouldn't have Sisley, and we wouldn't have Pissarro. That's the power of technology. Example number 3, the invention of lithography. Around the same time, lithography was invented in Germany, allowing artists to paint on some plates and then use those plates to create multiple copies of very high fidelity. The result was the democratization of art. The result was that art was able to leave the fancy salons and come out to the street. This is where we started seeing people like Henri Toulouse-Lautrec and Théophile Steinlen painting posters and advertising the famous cabaret of Paris, like Moulin Rouge and Le Chat Noir. Art has become for the masses. Example number 3, generative art. This is 1960s, 1970s, with the advance of computer and computer graphics. Pioneers like Vera Molnár started creating computer codes, an algorithm, and allowing the algorithm itself to generate art. So with the rise of these plotters, a discussion has started to spark. What is art? Is art the result of the algorithm, or is art the code itself and the algorithm itself? If you ask Vera, she will tell you that it's a delicate dance between the artist and the machine, and that art exists in a medium in between them. Fast forward, 2010s, another technology impacts art, blockchain and NFT, or non-fungible tokens. Most people think that NFTs are those silly apes. They're not. NFTs are digital certificates, digital certificate of ownership, digital certificate of authenticity, digital certificate of originality and provenance. And by owning an NFT, you're proving beyond any reasonable doubt the originality of the art. This has changed the life of many artists. Among them, one of my friends, Christelle Bshara, a local artist. She used to tell me, Alaa, before NFTs, everybody was happy to pay for my physical paintings, but nobody respected my digital paintings, and I love my digital paintings. And that's because people think that digital painting can be easily copied and pasted. But now, with NFT, there is a way to prove beyond any doubt that this is original, that this is painted by her, that this is one of one, and this is owned by whoever the buyer is. This created a vibrant market for digital art, allowing Christelle to sell many of her digital art as multiple ETHs, and allowing the famous people to sell this famous painting for $69 million a few years ago. The last example of technology impacting art is the mother of all technologies, AI. Today, AI is all around us. And even though I can talk to you for hours about its impact on business, today we're only talking about its impact on art. And there are two main AI technologies that are impacting art, GAN and diffusion. GAN stands for Generative Adversarial Networks. This is when you pit two AIs against each other in a fight, in a zero-sum game. One of these AIs is called the creator, and the second is called the discriminator. The job of the creator is to create art that is more and more realistic and human-looking. The job of the discriminator is to try to catch that this art was created by a software, not by a human. Both AIs start to up their games one by one to beat each other, and the result is an art that is indistinguishable from human art. An art that everybody can use today, open source. These GAN technologies are available for everybody. The second technology in art is the technology of diffusion. Diffusion is when you start with a lot of noise and then you start denoising it bit by bit until you get the art underneath it. You are using diffusion every day. Every time you use DALL-E or Midjourney or Stability to create art, you are using this diffusion technology. And diffusion reminds me of one of the most beautiful metaphors in art that I have ever heard, which is when Michelangelo was talking about his sculptures. And he said, the sculpture is already inside the marble. All I have to do is chisel away the extra material. This is what diffusion is doing. It's starting with superfluous material and then creating the art itself. New technology creates new art. New technology transforms art. And the latest example of that in history is AI. But AI in art raises a lot of questions, moral questions, ethical questions, legal questions. Let's address some of these questions. Number one, copyright. If I created an image in Midjourney, who owns this image? Do I own it? Does Midjourney, as an AI unconscious entity, own it? Does Midjourney, the company that created the software, own it? Or the company that owns the server on top of which the AI was trained? Or is it the millions of human artists whose paintings and drawings were used to train the AI, who own a tiny pieces of this copyright each? I don't know the answer to this question. And many lawyers and regulators around the world are trying to answer this question. This painting by Jason M. Allen, called Théâtre d'Opéra Spatial, won the Colorado Fair for Art. But then the regulators decided that you cannot copyright it because he used Midjourney to create it. These questions, we're going to wrestle with them for a while. Here's another question. Style plagiarism. Can we copyright style, not just paintings? I asked Midjourney to reimagine the Mona Lisa as if it was painted by Vincent van Gogh, as if it was painted by Salvador Dali, to reimagine the Mona Lisa as a Disney princess or as a Simpson character. Is this fun and playful, or is this breaking the law? Too many questions. What about fair competition? This photograph entered the most prestigious photography award in the world, the Sony World Photography Competition. It won first prize. The artist rejected the prize. He said, I generated this using AI, and I want to take this opportunity to spark a discussion among all of us about AI and art. Boris Ildaghan says, I think AI tools do not belong in photography. I'm not saying that we should kick them out completely. I'm saying that at least we should have a separate category for them. And he also coined a name for this category. He called it #promptography. Questions about art provenance. If everybody in the world has access to these AI tools, can you imagine how the market will be flooded with art? Maybe with cheap art? So how do you prove provenance? Well, it was Punk6529, the famous NFT philosopher online, who once said, and I paraphrase, thank God we invented NFTs before we invented GPTs. Because now, with technology like NFT, you could prove that this painting was created by a human or created by an AI. And then you can assign a value to it. And value is super important to art. It was Jean-Michel Basquiat who once said, people buy my paintings because they want to own a tiny piece of my soul. If we buy a painting created by AI, are we owning a tiny piece of the soul of AI? Or are we owning a piece of nothing because AI doesn't have a soul? So all of these questions are questions we have to wrestle with in the age of AI and art. But the biggest question and the most fundamental question remains the first question that every art history teacher starts class number 1 with, which is, what is art? And for that, I think it's overdue to go and change some of these definitions in encyclopedia, but maybe also in movies. If you ask Wikipedia what is art, Wikipedia will say it's a range of human activity and its resulting product. What does that mean? If an AI created art, then we cannot call it art? Or does Wikipedia need to change their definition? If we ask the Encyclopedia Britannica, they don't say human, but they use the word conscious. Art is a visual object or experience consciously created. So what does that mean? Does that mean that AI, as long as it is unconscious, We cannot call its fruit art. But one day, if and when AI achieves consciousness and sentience, only then we can call its fruit art. Too many questions. My favorite question comes from one of my favorite movies in 2004. In this movie, I, Robot, a cop played by Will Smith, is yelling at a robot, and he's telling him, "You're nothing. You're just a bunch of circuits and code." Can an AI ever compose a Beethoven symphony? Can AI ever take a blank canvas and turn it into a masterpiece? And the robot pauses for 1 second and answers. Can you? If you ask me, what is art? I would say art is whatever you want to be art. Art is whatever you feel. Art is whatever you experience by looking at these beautiful paintings or beautiful sculptures or experiencing the beautiful music. It doesn't matter what you consider art, whether Botticelli is art for you, or whether Da Vinci or Michelangelo, or whether it's the Impressionists like Claude Monet and Vincent van Gogh, or whether it's the Cubists like Picasso and Georges Braque, whether it's the Surrealists like Salvador Dali, or whether it's the modern pop art like Andy Warhol, like the craziness of abstract expressionism of Jackson Pollock, or whether it's the modern digital art of Beeple, of Christelle Pshara, and of Jason M. Allen. Art is whatever you think is art. But what I want you to remember is that new technology and new tool always leads to new art. And if I leave you with one message, let it be this. They always say that the difference between art and beauty is that art is about who produced it, and beauty is about who's looking. There are two pronouns, who, in this sentence. The first who was historically human, because humans only created arts. And now in the age of AI, non-humans are created art. The second who, so far, is still only humans, but maybe, just maybe, in the next few years, we will create an AI that is able to savor, to appreciate, and to enjoy art. Thank you.